Hi everyone, this is Kira here from Corporate Renaissance Group, and I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Brown, who's going to be walking you through how you can automate some of your day-to-day business processes with PowerApps and Microsoft Flow. So without further ado, here's Elizabeth.
Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Elizabeth Brown. I'm a business solution consultant here at Corporate Renaissance Group. I've been working here for the last 6 years. I used to work primarily with SharePoint, and now I work more with Office 365, so I use Flow, PowerApps, Planner, SharePoint, Teams, all the new stuff. So for today, oh right, I think there was a housekeeping slide. I must have. And just another note I wanted to add was, if you have any questions, please just type them into the window, the question window, and we'll get to them at the end. So the agenda for today is we're going to discuss the Power Platform and how you can connect your data and create custom workflows to help streamline your business. How PowerApps and Flow, we're going to show some sort of stories about how this Power Platform can be really useful and have a few demos. So the Power Platform is PowerApps, Microsoft Flow, and Power BI. It's those 3 separate products. So PowerApps is a no-code app development tool. The sort of user skill level required is you should be able to write formulas in Excel. I will actually show this later on, but you'll see that the sort of functionality, it's a graphical interface. You can kind of move things around, add things, and the code level is sort of being able to write sort of formula levels in Excel. It can be used to replace InfoPath forms, and the end of support for InfoPath is 2026. So you shouldn't be creating InfoPaths anymore, and you probably want to think about how you want to migrate them. I mean, it's still 7 years, 6 years, so you still have some time. Microsoft Flow is the workflow tool. It has a graphical interface. It has connections to Office 365, so Outlook, Excel, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams. There is a connector to Word, but it's a premium connector, so you have to pay a bit more. Connections to Dynamics 365, the Common Data Service. You have third-party connections like Salesforce, Google Docs. Some connectors require premium licenses like Salesforce. You need to pay a little bit extra for that. Power BI is a reporting tool. So it's a single tool that connects to a whole bunch of different data sources. So if you have SQL databases, Excel files, even web reporting, you can just sort of grab all the data and report on it in a single tool instead of having different data sources. It's very easy just to connect to a whole bunch of different data sources and create tools. There's a free desktop Power BI, which you can use to create reports, and then you have licensed versions which provide more sharing options, more automatic data refresh options. So the licensed versions just give you more options, but you can start playing around with it with the free desktop version. The use case number 1 we're going to talk about is vacation request and approval. We're going to show 2 options. The first is simple customization, built specifications, and the second is Microsoft out of the box, which we'll show you. So this one here where it's got new vacation request. So basically when you come in here, it gives you can see the little spinning wheel of the Power App. And so it's saying, hey, here I am, and then I can put in my comment. And then I can select when I want to start. And then I select the end date. And so you can see it's pretty simple, and then I just hit save, and then that's going to kick off a workflow that then sends it off for approval. So it's pretty straightforward. So if you want to look, if we go look behind, it's just a custom SharePoint list, and it's got start date, end date, employees, the approval status of the item, the title, and then just an ID. The ID and title out of the box. So you can see it's pretty straightforward. And it started as a SharePoint custom list in SharePoint 2010 with an info path form and a SharePoint workflow, not a flow. And since then, it's just been updated to work on the cloud. So basically, in this vacation approval flow, if I go refresh this page, you'll see that there's this new one that's running here. So that's the one that just started. So when I click on that run, you can see it shows you where exactly it got stopped. So you can see it when a new item is created. So on this vacation request list in SharePoint, then it sort of, you can see it has all this information about that item that was created. So that's sort of the first step. And then what it does is it gets the manager. So it says, who's the manager of this user? And so it goes finds the manager. And then it creates an approval. And so it says, okay, so we're going to go create this approval action. And then because you can, when you create the approval, you can assign it to multiple people. Because you can assign it to multiple people, this apply to each is created here. In this case, there's only going to be one of one because there's only one manager used for everyone. So what it does is then it posts an adaptive card in Teams. So it creates a Teams approval. And so it sends it to my manager here. And then it's just waiting for his approval. And so it's not going to show me the next steps because it's just sitting here waiting for approval. So I'll go back to one that succeeded. And so you see when I get here that there's basically saying for each response, again, for each response because you could have multiple approvals, right? And so it's saying it just has a condition. And then it says, okay, go inform the creator who submitted the request that they've been approved, and then update the item that it has been approved. And then if they had actually rejected it, it would say inform creator of rejection and record rejection on the actual list item. And then when I click on it, it's saying that it didn't execute because this condition was true. So it's just a simple if there saying if it's approved, go do these items, otherwise go do that. So it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. So that's one way you can do it. The other thing that Microsoft actually has is this is in the PowerApps portal here. So if you said Canvas saying you want to go create, sorry. So if I'm in here in my apps and I want to go create an app, and then you can see down here, it's got start with a blank canvas or a template. So if I'm just going to pick a tablet layout for this one. You could also pick a phone layout. And you see there's a bunch of different sort of ones that are provided here, like onboarding tasks, sort of PowerApps training, a service desk, cost estimators, but we'll just pick the leave request and I'll go click use. And now it's just sort of creating this app based on this leave request template. One of the things it's going to do is going to ask me for some permissions in a moment, saying, okay, we're going to need to connect and get your manager and whatnot. Can we do that? So we're just waiting for this to run through here. It shouldn't take super, super long. While that's running, let me just tidy that up. And I did test this earlier today just to check, and it ran much, much faster then. So now because I'm demoing it, it's taking a long time. So we're going to, instead of just sitting here and waiting for this to run, I'm just going to leave it running in the background, and I'll start talking about the other use case that I had. So in this case, so you see I have an Excel file here, and there's just a whole bunch of different tasks that are sort of generic tasks that we do on a sort of Business Central implementation. And we wanted to use Planner. And so basically with Planner, you can come in and add tasks. So what they had to look at doing was coming and adding each task and saying first task. And so they would have to have gone in and then say, okay, what was the due date? And if you actually look at the number of tasks here, there's just over 200, I believe. So there's actually quite a few. So when they were looking at doing that, they're like, oh no, this is going to take a really long time when we already have sort of an Excel file with predefined tasks, to just actually have to come in and then type like all the little bits and then add it like that, and then keep going like that through every single one, and then copy and paste. And some of these have a bit more information, and they have some comments that needed to be added too. So what I ended up doing in this case was I created a custom flow just to import the tasks, right? So again, when I come onto this import task, it's got me the details about it. It says the status is on. So if you want to, you can turn off the flow if you don't want it to run or you don't want to use it. There is a turn off, turn on there, but so it's telling me the status is on. It tells me when I created it, and you can see the different connections here that it's Excel Online and it's connecting to Planner as well. So if I go and edit it, we'll walk through some of the steps. So it's manually triggered because it's on a sort of ad hoc basis whenever it's required. And then I'm initializing two variables here, a date and a var date temp. I'll explain a little bit farther why I need to do that. It's basically just how Excel handles dates. So what I'm doing is then I'm saying, so in my OneDrive for Business, go and grab this particular file, and then there's a table. So in order to get to it, you need to have a table. So basically, if you have a couple of data like this, so anything like that, basically, if you just select it and you do insert, you can make that a table. And then just say, in this case, my data has headers, and then it will, if you don't say that, you can uncheck that if your data doesn't have headers, but that will make it into a table. And once you do that, then you can access it. So all you have to do is select the table and just insert table, and then it's going to be accessible. I'm going to close that file so it doesn't cause any issues. So basically, it goes to that table and says grab all the rows present in that task table. And then it says for each of those, we have to do some date formatting here and then go and create a task. So we're connecting to this planner here, this client one, and then we're just creating a task based on the information from that Excel file. So what I'm doing with the dates is just because of how Excel works, is I'm just saying get the temp date, so var temp date, put the target completion date, the data from that field in there. And then I'm saying this length one is basically just saying if the length of this is 0, that means it's the empty string, so then just set a default due date. So just set it to December 1st, basically. I actually think that we're set to November 30th because of the time zone. And so otherwise, what you have to do is, because Excel stores the date as a number, so it's coming in as a string, but it actually comes in as a number. So what you have to do is, when I put this, you can see this little formula picks up. So it takes so December 1st, 1900, and then you have to add the number to it, because it's going to add the number of days from from January 1st, 1900. So that's how it's kind of a little workaround just to get the dates to work properly. So I'm just taking the value that's in that var date, and then I have to convert it to an integer because it's expecting an integer, and then I add that number to January 1st, 1900, and that will give me the correct date. So yeah, it's just Excel. It stores dates as numbers as an offset from January 1st, 1900. So when you want to put them into where it's expecting the actual date format, you just have to do a little bit of playing around. So what I can do is I can actually do test and then just run a test on this, or I could just go and run it. And you can see that the trigger went successfully because it's got that little check, it's got the var dates, it got all the table rows, and now it's starting to work through all the 204 rows. And so if I go over to the planner, you can actually see that it's starting to add in all the tasks here. And so now you have all the tasks in the planner, and you don't have to type each one in manually. So then you can go and update them and make changes as required. So that was another sort of situation where we used it. Okay, good. So now I'm coming back to the leave request, and you can see how I mentioned that it was going to ask me for the permission. So it's saying we need to use Office 365 users, and that's so it can find out information with the current user and their manager, as well as Outlook, so it can send different emails, right? So I'm going to click Allow, and then it's just going to finish building up the app with those default data sources. And then it's giving me Welcome to PowerApps Studio, so I can just skip that. So you can see, so it's got like a screen here, and so if I go and hit this little play button, that's going to allow me to preview. So I could say, I want to log in as an employee, and so then you have like a whole bunch of sort of options here about like how there's 10 days available, sick leave, floating holidays, jury duty, bereavement. So you can kind of do some configurations about leave types available, what your company holidays are showing up there. So you see there's just all these little tabs, and then you have like sort of clicks about like, hey, here's these different types of holidays that we have. And then you can say, okay, and then they have an example vacation request with pending, but up here there's a create request. You can go create a request, and you can see it's got the start date and who it needs to be submitted to, and the title and detail. And again, it's just got a date selector, and it's going red because the end date is now. Apparently I want a lot of time off, so. And then the submit request, so that's actually grayed out right now. But so you can see how just by hitting that sort of template, there's actually quite a lot of stuff provided for you. So I'm going to hit this little tiny X over here, which is kind of hard to see. And then I can go and look at these different canvases and see what's going on. It does seem like it's just really grayed out, so I guess it would have been fine to run it. It's supposed to take me to the confirmation screen. So I'm not really sure what's going on with that. But anyways, as you can see, so you can kind of look at this, and then if you want to make your own changes to it, but it's a pretty complete format already, so if you needed to go and change it. So when I click on this home screen, this is the one we were at first, right, where it had the create request. And actually, if you see login as manager group, so that's there, and this is the welcome page home header, and then login as employee. And so when you go into the home screen, and then you can see that there's like a new request screen. So you see how it's got the same sort of look on the top for these ones, and then it gives you a lot of information. And then when you click on the little one, so you can see, okay, so this is the label here. And then if you wanted to, you're saying, oh, this is the label. Basically, I want to make that bigger. You can just click like that and make it bigger. If I click on it here, so you see it's got, this is the size, so the size is 24. So if I go back to text, so it's saying if the editing request is edit, then it's edit request, or otherwise it's new request. So based on what this editing request is set to, then it's either going to be edit request or new request. So that's sort of like how you would see it, like the if statements you would see in Excel. And then it's just, this has been ampersand just to combine the two little text options there. So I think we'll move on from this now, but I just wanted to show that to you initially, just how there's a bunch of templates and you can just create them quite quickly and play around with them and see if they provide what you need. as I said, we are using the much simpler certification request because it came out of what we had been using before, and we just sort of updated it to work with the cloud. And then Microsoft came out with this template with like much more fancy features than what we have, but what we have works, so we haven't changed it at all. But I guess if you were starting completely new, it would probably make sense to come in and look at this like leave request and say, does this make sense to implement something like this, or do we want to just go make our own little custom list in SharePoint and go forward from there? So I'm just going to leave that up there. So another request that we had was that basically they wanted to have a little app where it was so that people would have it on their phones, so that when they started work, they were like, okay, I'm coming in now, this is when I'm started. And then when they were leaving, they kind of were like, okay, I'm done. So this is just a little Power App that basically, it's when they come in, so in a second, it's just loading here. So it's just got their name at the top, and you can see that this is the layout that you would have on a phone. I could put it on my phone and try to Chromecast it. It's just my phone and the Chromecasting is very unreliable, so I'm just going to show you on the screen here because it's much, much more reliable than trying to use my phone right now. So basically they have a button that says, hey, they started work, and then what that actually does is it's just using SharePoint as a behind list. So if I refresh this page, you can, one second, I'm just waiting for the page. So you can see that right now, 2/21, that there was like, hey, they started work at that point, and their status has been changed to at work from off. So it just went and updated that. I just want to wait for another second so that the times will change here. But basically, and then we're just going to wait another little second. Yeah, so it's 2:22. So worked for 1 minute and then went home and was sick or something. So just going to refresh this other page over here, and you can see it's got the stop work, the event time, and that the status here will be changed in 1 second, yes. And then you can see the status has changed to off as well, so no longer at work. So it was just to sort of what they wanted, a button to record when people started and a button to record when they stopped working. So it was pretty straightforward just to create this little app. We're going to go into edit mode and look at how it was created. Just wait for it to load up here. So the data source is this employee status list over here, so that's what it pulls from. And it's just got a list of employee names over here, and then whether they're at work or off work based on different variables stored over here as well. So that each time each person hits this, it's run in the context of that user. I will shut that one down. Again, I got that Power App. So basically, you can see this one is much, much simpler than the templated one that Microsoft created for the leave request. There's just a simple work stream. And then there's this rectangular header up here that's just added, the default sort of colors. There's this label, and the label is just set to user, and then you have parentheses dot full name, and that's just how you get the user who's using its name. So if someone else logged in, they'd see their own name in there. And then there's two buttons here. There's a start work and a stop work. And so what happens is if I go switch to the visible option, so the visible on this one is not start work. And then if I go to the start work, you're going to see the visible is start work. So you have the two options there. So if I go to the main work stream, so you see over here on advanced, so what it does is it's, actually let me go to just here. Visible. Just going to bring this. Okay. So I'm just going to format the text and show you here just so it's a little bit easier to see. So basically it's saying update contacts, current username, user : stash full name. So it's just taking the user full name and it's creating a variable called current username and it's storing it in there. And then the next thing it's doing is it's creating a collection, which is called current employee, and then it's filtering that employee status list to get the current employee in that collection. It's clear collecting it, so it's removing anything there, so that every time it comes unvisible, you won't end up with multiple versions of the same item stored in that collection. You just want to have one in there. And then what the next one is doing is getting the current status, and it's storing that in a so based on the status of that record, what that status value is. So if the status is off, then it's going to say that start work equals true, and if it's otherwise, it's just going to set start work to false. And so then that start work variable is used over here to make the buttons visible. Oh, come on. Put you back up there. If you wanted to, I have put the buttons so that they're offset. You could actually put them one on top of each other so that it looks like the label of the button's changing and it's just the same button. But you can see that. But you don't actually have to do that. And then what these buttons actually do, when you select one of the buttons, so if I go to the on select option, so that when you click on it, it's got startwork.run and it's passing in the username, and then it's doing a whole bunch of calculations to get the current date and time, because this now is the current date and time, but it's in the UTC time zone. So what you want to do is add the time zone offset, which is in minutes, so that's why I've got the minutes here, to that current now time. But what happens is, because the time zone offset is based on standard time, it's not taking for account of the fact that there's daylight savings time, so that's why there's this -60. It's just because we're still using daylight savings time, so it actually should be 4 hours and not 5 between UTC and where we are, and it doesn't take account for that. So we should be able to build a more sophisticated option than just putting -60. But for now, I had put -60. And then it just updates the context so that the start work is set to false, so that this isn't shown anymore and the other button is shown. And this startwork.run, what that is it's actually a flow. So if I go over to my flows, so here I am in my flow, so you can see that there's this start work and stop work flow. And basically, if I go, again, you can see when it ran and stuff like that. If it failed, you see that it shows up in sort of reddish. So here in the Power App, so it's just basically saying that it's a Power App trigger, so that when you create it, then you can add it to a Power App and pass in information. And so basically it creates an item, and then if I wanted to, you can actually go apps in Power Apps, and that will create a new field in Power Apps. And so what it does is then it creates an item for the employee hours based on what employee it was, the event time, and the fact that they started work. Then it gets all the items from the employee status. Even though this is filtered so that it's filtered by the employee, and there should only be one employee in the list, because of the way flow works, that you have to do an apply to each, just because multiple items could be returned, so you need to do apply to each, even though if everything's set up correctly, you should only be able to do one and one. So then basically you go and say, this is the ID from this one, so that you're updating that item, and that you're going to set the status to add work. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward flow. And then we have the similar one for the stop work, which just basically does the opposite, where it sets it to off instead of add work. So that's a pretty straightforward, easy flow to use. It was useful for so when was asked for sort of a client as a demo, and then one of the things that they sort of balked at was that you have to license every user that's using PowerApps. So every user that comes into a PowerApps has to have a PowerApps license of some form. Most of the time, if you're using like an Office 365 subscription, that does allow you to create a PowerApp to deal with the data on Office 365. If you want to deal with the data in the Common Data Service or in like Business Central, then you would need licensing for those applications as well. So it can become more costly. So depending on where the data is stored and the number of users and the type of licenses you're assigning to users, they don't necessarily need to have like an E5 license. There's different levels of licensing. So you can assign a basic licensing if they only need access to sort of a PowerApps and Flow. But it does mean because every user does need a license that there are cost implications. And so you kind of have to balance it about like how much is this going to cost to create a custom app? Where are you going to store that custom app if you're going to build a customization? Because you can put it in Azure or you can put it in AWS, but you're still going to have subscription costs for that. Or you're going to have to put it on your own server, which means you have to buy and maintain a server for it, right? And then you also have to like update it because there's always updates. So there's might be a new framework installed, and then you have to maybe have updates to the code. So you have to have a developer who can come make those updates as required. Where something like this, you just sort of need power users who, so it should theoretically be easier to maintain because you don't need to be a developer to build and then to maintain it, to make updates as environments change or requirements change. It's faster to build. So when you're looking at whether or not you want to use a Power App, that's sort of one of the things you have to consider is licensing costs, how many users are going to use it, how much it's going to cost to license, and how much would it cost to develop it, and then to maintain the code going forward, because it's not just the initial cost of developing the code, it's where the code lives, where it's running, and then you have to maintain that as well, whether it's a subscription, and then changes to the code, updates to the code going forward. So just sort of different options you have to think about. So just things to consider. So we kind of talked through that one. Just gonna close out of here. So the other thing that you have is this has been coming is you might not actually necessarily see it in every tenant because it is showing up in U.S. regions. It's definitely down there. If you're in a Canadian region, you might not see it yet. If you're on first release, you might see it. There's different release patterns, so this AI builder is not everywhere. But I'm just going to walk through how you can kind of use this sort of AI. So basically, I want to do like a form processing model, so I'm going to call it invoices. And then I'm just going to create that. So this is what we're trying to do is we're going to try and I'm going to add some documents initially. The way the documents have to be is the format has to be fairly similar. And you sort of need at least 5 of them. It can be a little tricky because you need 5 documents that have very similar quality, and they also have to have decent quality. Like if you're trying to use like a JPEG image where it's fuzzy, or if you're trying to do a receipt that's like all crumpled and there's a lot of crumple marks, the model's it's going to really struggle with that. So basically, I'm going to analyze it. You can see that these all have like the same invoice format. I will just go quickly and open it up and show you what the training files look like. So just so you can see that it's an invoice. It's all the text is clear. It's not like it's fuzzy or anything like that. And so basically everything for all these 5 images, they all have exact same format. That there's like some items here, there's an invoice over here, there's the balance due, the date, from and bill to. So if you're trying to do different documents where the format's different between the 2 of them, this model's not going to work. It's just not going to be able to find them. So you can see now it's finished sort of doing initial analysis of it. And then basically it's going to say, what fields do you want to pick? So I can say, if I hover over this sort of invoice one, you can see it's saying that it's 100% sure that that's sort of the invoice. And then I can pick the date, bill to, due date, balance due, subtotal, tax, shipping. This one here, the table, it can't really handle tables right now. Microsoft is doing a lot of work on AI, so I mean, it probably will be able to do it in the future, but right now it's not able to handle that. So I'm just going to click done and just ignore that table out of the fields that I've selected. Those are just 9 different, like invoice, bill to, etc. And so basically it's got the number of sample documents it's showing here and the selected form field. The other thing about the number of sample documents is that the total size is quite small for the number of documents. It's so you can't have quite huge, like 1 gigabyte image files and have it try to analyze them. So you can see now it's gone and trained. So if I go to the details page here, it's got the training document. So I can do a quick test. So I'm just going to go upload. And I'm going to go grab my test one here. And then you can see it's just running through a test. And then you can see it's found the bill to, and it's saying that it's like 53% convinced that that's the bill to. Over here with the date, it's like 100%. The invoice is 100% again. The total is 100%. It didn't seem like it picked up the from properly. But we'll just say close. So basically now, you notice up here it says your model isn't published yet. Publish it to use it in apps and flows. So if I go and publish this, then I can actually go create a Power App and use this AI form processing model. So once this is published, we'll go do that. One of the things about this is because this is fairly new and it's, there's some sort of growing pains, you notice that once I've published it, all I can do is delete it. I can change the model name, but I can't actually go back and say I want to change any of the documents or any of the fields. So when you're selecting the fields and selecting the documents, once you get to the sort of trained model, once it's been trained, you can't go back. So it's a little limited right now. I was just picking the form processing model. If I go back to build here, you can see that there's some other models. Even though it was this AI builder free trial thing that I've got up here, this is actually all just part of the AI. It's not part of, I'm not using the free trial aspects for these ones. So there are different model options as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to apps, and I'm going to go create an app. And we're going to do a Canvas one again. And so we're going to do a tablet layout blank app. And then again, it gives you the Welcome to PowerApps Studio. So when I go into the Insert tab here, you see it's got this AI builder. So then I can say I want to add in a form processor because that's the one I just created. And then you see it's got, this is the invoices model, the one that I just created, so I can select that. So I'm going to put that there. What I can also do is over in the forms, I'm going to do a display form. Do I want to do that? Yeah. Actually, I'm not going to do that because I'm just looking at the time and I'm running out of time. So I'm just going to put some labels in quickly. Sorry, I didn't realize how fast time had gone. Okay. How about I go put you over there? So I'm going to just put the form analyzer over there. Let me add in a couple of labels. So what I want to do is I want to access the form processor so that when I So I'm accessing the form processor. I want to get the content, and then I want to get the field. And then you can see I can get like the different options like the date. So now I want to do the same thing here. So I want to access that form processor once I'm accessing that item. I want the form content and then the field. And then again, I can say the balance due. And then I can pick another one here, form processor 1, form content. And so you see I can scroll down so I can get the invoice number there. So if I go and hit the little play button just to run this quickly, basically I pick, when I hit the analyze, it prompts you to add an image. So when I do that and click open, so now it's just running the analysis. So this is running the model on this particular form. And then you see once it's finished that, then these fields over here, so it's automatically went and grabbed the invoice number and put it in here. The total went over here. And then it's also showing you how accurate it thinks it is. So again, the bill too, it's not super accurate. And then it's got the date here as well. So those fields are here. Right now they're just in labels, which isn't as useful. But because it's very easy in PowerApps to build data connections, I could put this in like the new form of a list or a common data model or a different data source, and then have this data submitted directly to a data source. And you could make it editable in the field so that if there was a mistake made, that a person could just kind of overwrite it and then hit submit, and then have the data submitted. So in terms of if you needed to extract information from like invoices where they have a very consistent format, it's pretty easy to do that out of the box. I'm just going to leave that now. Where was I? So just for a recap, so you can see how it's pretty easy to create custom workflows, custom apps, and you can quite quickly create a different solution, and you can deal with access different data. So any questions? So unfortunately, so the question is, how do you configure permissions so that employees can access the data on the Power App but cannot access the SharePoint list directly? Unfortunately, you can't do that. With Power Apps, each user that uses it needs access to the data source behind. You have to give them access to the Power Apps. You have to share the Power App with them. And you also have to make sure they have access to the data source, wherever that data source is. If it's SharePoint or a common data service, you can use Excel files in OneDrive, but they need access to that file. On the other hand, Flow, they don't necessarily need access. They need access to be able to trigger the flow, but within the flow itself, all the connections are done in the context of the user. So if I go into this flow here, my stop workflow, so in this one here, you can see I have a connection to SharePoint. That connection is made as myself, as my eBrown account. So that means that everyone who runs this flow will be connected to SharePoint using this same account. So in this case, they wouldn't necessarily need access to the actual data because it's being written to using a flow. So you could possibly do it if you wanted to have a flow that was triggered from the Power App that allows users to write data to a list, and then the connection in the flow is actually going to write it, and the user's just having access to the data. The user would, in that case, would be able to add data to a SharePoint list without being able to write data directly. That's because you're using a flow as an intermediary. But if you're trying to use Power Apps directly, and you're trying to use like the submit form option in Power Apps to directly add data to a list or directly edit data in a list, then the users will also need those permissions. So other training options. So there's actually a Power Apps and a user group for Microsoft, so you can kind of keep up with that. The community call, they have different community calls actually. There's Wonder Laura, who has a blog here. And so you can see like there's a PowerApps monthly community call, which was actually earlier today. And so they're talking about like different sources. You can actually come and watch it later on. And she has a lot of different blog posts about like how to put a text input pattern validation, so that if you want it to say that like, hey, it has to be like a phone number, so it has to have like only digits, and you want like 3 digits and a dash, and then 3 digits and a dash, and then 4 digits. So you want a certain format to the number, then she's showing you how to use like a text input pattern validation in PowerApps on that. How to like convert to PDF, different ways of doing that. So I find her blog is really, really great, so that's a good source. Again, Microsoft sometimes has PowerApps in a day training, so if you Google that, you might find something near you. They can be free. They also have paid trainings, but yeah, App in a Day, roadshow events. And so you can see, oh, this is a bit old because it's 2018, so I don't know if there's anything newer than that. But I do know that there was one going on in the Caribbean fairly soon, so just keep out an eye for App in a Day. That can be useful. I guess that's it for questions. I hope everyone found this informative. Thanks very much. Have a great day.